Hello everybody, welcome back. In this video, we shall look at some ideas to enhance your fortune teller game, learn more from it, and also in the process earn bonus points. Now, remember, fortune teller is a game which is kind of mystical in nature, very pleasing in that sense. But underlying that is this entire notion of lists. This is the game where we basically get you familiar with lists and what are the different functions in there, right? So that's the important part of this. Now, before I get on with the bonus ideas, let's just look a little bit about bonus. Number one, and I always say this, bonus comes after basic, right? Now, in this case, the most important basic concept is that of lists. So please get familiar with what lists are, how do you create them, what are the basic operations, which is all covered in the game itself, right? We also looked at broadcast and wait, right? So please spend a moment to understand the difference between broadcast and wait, and try to use that in your activity because it's a very nice opportunity to do so. Okay? Now, once you're through with all this, then you can try to earn bonus points, and which is the second rule, that you always earn bonus, right? What you can do for bonus is almost endless. What earns bonus today may or may not earn bonus in future. Bonus is your opportunity to push yourself, try out new things, and amaze everybody. However, remember rule number one, that bonus comes after basic. In this case, the basic really is about lists and the different operations that there are. And also, like I said, broadcast and wait. But the list is the bigger part of it. Now, I'm going to add one more rule from this video onwards. Basically, that please add instructions and description on the project page to tell clearly what ideas you have tried. You can try more than one idea, that's all right, but please tell us what you have tried, because a lot of these list related ideas are really coding related, right? So if you do not mention them, it's very easy to miss these, right? So please make it a point to write the description, tell us what is it that you're trying to do, right? So that we can, everybody knows what's going on. All right, so with all that preamble, let's look at some ideas that you could try, right? Now, remember, the very first thing to realize is that this is a kind of mystical, little bit like sort of a fantasy world type of game, right? So you could definitely enhance that part by adding mystical effects like colors, or maybe, color effects, or some kind of music or costume changes, either on the ball or on the wizard, or actually even on the backdrop, right? So you could try some effects that makes it more mystical, right? However, I would lump all of that into just one point, which is, say, mystical effects, because again, I want you to really focus on the list part here, right? So that's why that's just one point. Next few ideas are all about using lists creatively, right? So the first thing that comes to my mind from that point of view is to help out in the answer list formation. Now remember, in our game, the wizard answer is prepared in the background in the very beginning. The player itself has no role in deciding what goes into the answers list, right? But we could do a mix of these two. So wizard probably prepares a few questions by itself, right? And then wizard asks the player, okay, please tell me what else can I answer, right? And let's say player gives some ideas. So wizard will basically check, okay, I already have this, and then can ask for new ideas from the player, right? So that way, it's a nice combination of the wizard's own answers as well as the player's imagination, right? And I think that makes a nice idea. Yeah. The next one is a totally different concept in a way, but it fits into the structure, and that I call that poetry maker, right? Now, poetry maker is a slightly different game actually. Here we have a wizard who is not telling you your fortune, but is giving you some kind of poetic sentences, which obviously will make you laugh, let's say, right? Which may not make perfect sense in terms of what they're saying, but that's why they are funny, right? So the way it works is that wizard, instead of maintaining just one list of answers, it has probably, say, four lists, right? So maybe a noun, a verb, an adjective, and an adverb, right? And now wizard basically, whenever it is asked to form a sentence or a poem, line of a poem, it randomly, takes these fragments and joins them together to form a sentence, right? Now, this will again require you to index, say, different lists, to join them all together, and so on and so forth. And hence, we put this as a bonus idea, right? I'm giving you a couple of descriptions, links in the description for you to sort of take a reference from, right? Now, one thing here is that when you do a poetry maker, remember that the total number of answers that the wizard can provide. It's not just the number of elements on one list. Because, for example, let's say you have got, four lists, and each list has got, let's say, three items, right? So three nouns, three verbs, three adverbs, three adjectives. Then potentially, if every sentence has, let's say, all these four, then you have really 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which is 81 potential answers, right? So please make sure of that, so that there's a little bit of mathematics involved in this. Yeah. Moving forward, you can create what I call a tolerant wizard, right? Now, the wizard, remember, in our game, uh, gets angry as soon as we repeat any question, right? So if the question has been asked before and we ask that again, the wizard gets angry and it quits, right? But you could have, okay, wizard maybe could be a little bit more tolerant, right? So wizard can say that, okay, look, you can ask me a question twice, I'll still answer. But if you ask me for a third time, I will get angry, right? Or maybe you can ask me 3 times. If you do ask me for the fourth time, then I will get angry, right? And the way to do this would be to create another list along with your questions, and in which you keep track of how many times a question has been asked, right? Now, remember, list is really like a bunch of compartments, connected together. So you can think of it as the many variables. So here we are creating a list which is effectively keeping track of how many times any question has been asked, right? So instead of creating that many variables, we just create a list, and every time we add a new question, we check if it's already there, then we increment the counter, right? And then that way wizard can decide if this question has been asked maybe 2 times before or something like that, right? Then we can do something what I call a clever wizard, right? Now, what is a clever wizard? In our case, the wizard, what I mean in the class game, the wizard basically just randomly picks up answers from the list of answers it has and it gives you, right? Now, what that means is that sometimes you will find that for successive questions, for consecutive questions, the wizard is just giving you the same answer, right? Now, what if, let's say, the wizard were a little bit more cleverer and it says that, okay, look, if I have answered something now, for the next 3 questions or maybe next 5 questions, I am not going to answer this particular answer, and that will make it very interesting. The way to do this would be to keep track of what answers the wizard is giving in a separate list, right? And then, so let's say the last 5 questions you can keep track in a separate list, and you can definitely, see that the new answer that's picked up is already a part of that list. In fact, this is a very powerful style of programming, very interesting concept. You could try this, and actually this is very useful in many other contexts as well, right? Finally, we can have some kind of reporting on the wizard answers. So what I mean by that is that, so wizard probably, let's say, has 11 or 12 answers that it can give, but maybe in the course of the game it gave only 3 out of those 11 or 12, and then the game got over, right? So maybe in fact within that it's answered the same answer twice and then a new answer once, right? So the wizard can, when the game gets over, the player can say, okay, look, you had 11 answers to give me, but I could see only 2 out of those 11, right? And the way you do it again is that for wizard answers, you create a list, whatever answers wizard is providing, create a list, and you keep counting how many times a particular answer has been given, right? So this is really using a list for counting purposes, right? Instead of creating so many variables, you just create a list, right? And hence it's useful. Yeah. Now let's just look at these ideas in context of the game that we had done in the class. Remember, the class game was quite straightforward in a way. It's just kind of flowed in one flow, but you can do more. The first idea that I said is that of mystical effects. So what I really mean is making this background, the costume of the crystal ball, the costume of the wizard itself, probably adding some more sounds and so on. So just to add more elements of mysticism in this whole thing, because that adds the fun part of this, right? But like I said, I wouldn't want you to spend too much time on those things, because really the focus is on lists, right? So the first idea that I gave from the list is the user helping out in preparing the wizard answers, right? Now, what do I mean by that, right? Look here, the wizard prepares answers all by itself. Now, at this point, we could say, instead of broadcast ready and start asking questions, you can say, okay, look, I'm ready. Can you give me some ideas for answers, right? So wizard asks me that, and then the player tells me, okay, maybe you could add, let's say, very funny, right? And if that is already part of the list that wizard has, the wizard can tell, no, please tell me some more ideas, right? So that way the player plays a role in forming this list called wizard answers, right? Next, I spoke about poetry maker. So here, the idea is that instead of telling you fortune, the wizard tells you about some kind of sentences which are somewhat a little bit funny. The way that works is that instead of just wizard answers one list, which is all that wizard has, wizard is going to have to create multiple lists and then populate them all, right? And then basically pick up randomly from all of these lists and join them together, right, to make a nice sentence. There are descriptions, there are videos in the description that you could use. There are actually links in the description that you can use. But the point here is to realize is that whenever you do this, then the number of answers that the wizard can give, it's not just the length of just one of these lists. In fact, you have to multiply the different lengths to get the correct answer, right? But that's actually a very interesting variation for this game, right? Now I talked about a more tolerant wizard, right? Now, what do I mean by that? Remember, in our game in the class, the moment a question is repeated, and how do we know it's been repeated? Because, well, if your questions, which is a list that contains all the questions that you have been asking, if that contains the new question, right? So the wizard immediately gets angry and it just quits, right? It says this broadcast getting over. However, you could have a wizard which is a little bit more tolerant and said, okay, look, you've asked me this question once. I'll allow you to ask me once more, after which I'll get angry. Maybe once more or twice more or however times you want, right? The way you would do that, one smart way of doing that would be, along with your questions, you also create, let's say, another list, which is, let's say, your question, how many times has been asked. So maybe your question times, right? So when I add this list here, they add answer to your questions, I also increment that number, right? So I know this question has been asked once, right? I know this question has been asked twice, and so on and so forth, right? So you need to basically keep on. In fact, that loop will go here. If this, in this loop here, you will have to add more conditions to figure that out, right? But that will make the wizard look a little bit more tolerant, right? Next, I talked about this clever wizard, and now this is actually a very, very interesting idea, where remember that the wizard is just picking up answers randomly from this list of answers, right? So it means that sometimes wizard answers the same thing again and again because it just depends on this random number, right? But let's say whatever answer the wizard is giving us, which is a random number here, let's say we store that in a new list, which is, let's say, the last 5 answers, right? So if I pick up a number, I put that in the last 5 answers, right? And I tell you that, okay, look, whenever I pick up a new answer, I will check, I'll make sure that this answer is not a part of the previous 5 answers or something like that, right? So that way the wizard will appear quite clever. It's not going to repeat answers as much as it will do right now, right? In fact, the kind of program you will end up with is very powerful because you will be updating a list of last 5 answers. You'll remove an element from it, you'll add a new element, right? And in fact, that is all really quite smart, and we'll actually see these examples a little later in the course. But you could try that, and that makes a very nice actually nice variation for this, right? Finally, I spoke about this reporting of wizard answer. So what I mean is that, notice that wizard in the beginning says that, I have got, say, 11 answers that I can provide you, but in reality, probably it just gave me 3 or 4 out of these, right? And even within that, maybe it repeated absolutely twice and perhaps very funny twice, right? Because this is doing a random number, right? So if we keep track of what answers we are getting and how many unique answers I got, so you can tell at the end of this, maybe the crystal ball or something can tell that, look, you got, say, 2 out of those 11 answers, right? That 2 unique answers. So even though you asked 4 questions, but really you got only 2 unique answers, right? Now this you could do by adding a list, right, which keeps track of any answer, how many times it's been given, right? So along with wizard answers, maybe you can have a list called wizard answers provided. So every time wizard picks up, say, a particular answer, that counter becomes 1, and at the end of this game becomes incremented, actually not 1, right? At the end of the game, you check whether how many of those answers are non-zero, and that way you can figure out how many unique answers you got, right? Now these are really just some of the ideas. You can actually extend this game in many different ways, but I hope this gave you a picture of what all you can do. Most important is that try to enjoy the process, try to go slow, try to learn. Do not try to rush through this because lists take a while to grasp, but once you get a hang of it, they are very powerful, right? So As always, enjoy the process, have fun, and it will all fall in place. Yeah. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.